What exactly are these graphs? And what do they have to do with anything? Would you like to find out how to make them? Well, let's find out. Every time we hear a sound, it forms a pattern. And that pattern can sometimes be formed by these shapes. One of the kind of graphs that we'll look at is called the Rose curve. Let's see how to graph it. These two graphs represent Rose curves. This cosine one, notice it crosses the x-axis, whereas the sine version of it does not. Instead, it's going to reflect across the y-axis. Each of the values in our equation means something. So A here, in this case, is going to tell us how long the petal is. Whether we're dealing with the sine version of it or the cosine version of our rose, A will always tell us exactly how long each petal is going to be. The N is going to tell us how many petals we have. As an example, in this case we have an even number of petals. So if N is 2, then we're going to have to multiply that by 2, and then that gives us 4. So notice in this case we have 4 petals. If it's an odd number, we don't have to multiply by 2. For example, in this case we have 5, and the number of petals that we have is exactly 5 petals. So it doesn't matter if we're dealing with sine or cosine, it's going to be the same situation. Here again we have 2, and that's even, so we're going to multiply that by 2, gives us 4, and again that means that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 petals. In this case N is odd because it's 3, and we're not going to multiply by 2, we're going to keep the same number, so 3 means that we're going to have 1, 2, 3 petals. Let's graph this. Now N is 3 on this one, and that's odd. So from what we said before, that means the number of petals is going to be the same. It's going to be 3. The next thing is we need to figure out the starting point. Because we're dealing with a sine function, our first maximum, our starting value, is going to end up being 90 divided by that same number of petals value that we got. So it's going to be 90 divided by 3. So 90 divided by 3 is 30. That means our starting value, our first maximum, is going to happen at 30 degrees. But how far out do we need to make each one? That's where the value in front of sine comes in. So here the value in front of sine is 3. So that means that we're going to go 3 radius lengths out, and that's going to be the furthest that we're allowed to go. To get the next maximum, we're going to need to go basically according to the symmetry of the graph. For 360 degrees, if we have 3 petals, that means we're going to have to take that 360 and split it equally between the 3 petals. So we're going to have to do 360 divided by 3. And so we're using that same 3 that we got here, and that's going to end up giving us 120 degrees. So that number of petals value is what we're dividing by. So if we go 120 degrees over from 30, where will we be? So 30 plus 120 is going to put us at 150. So our next maximum value, which is 3 out from the center, is going to be at 150 degrees. So we'll have to go another 120 degrees because we know every 120 degrees is where we're going to get a maximum value. So 120 plus 150 is 270. So we know that we're going to have to go to 270 degrees and put our next maximum value, which again is going to be 3 out from the center. So we basically have the outline of our graph, and we should technically plot a couple more points to see how wide it is, but we're just doing a sketch now. So our rose curve is going to end up looking like the following once we get a rough sketch of everything. In a future video, we'll talk about how to actually determine how wide the graph is a little bit better. So here's another example that we can graph. Notice that this time n is 2, which is an even number. So if it's even, multiply that number by 2. So 2 times 2, that's going to be 4. So we expect to have 4 petals. And this is a cosine graph. So cosine is always going to start right here on the x-axis. So right at 0 degrees is where we're going to have our first maximum at. That 4 that we have in this case is going to be how far out we're allowed to go. So we're going to start at 0, go 4 radius lengths out, and put a point. So we want to know how often to put these points. So remember that everything is going to be equally spaced around our 360 degrees. So if we have 4 petals, that means that we have 360 divided by 4 because of that equal spacing, and that's going to mean they're going to be 90 degrees apart. So the next maximum or the next petal is going to be 90 degrees over from 0. So 0 plus 90, we know that that's 90 degrees. So we're going to put our next petal maximum at 90 degrees. For the following petal maximum, we're going to take that 90 that we currently have and add another 90, because again, remember, we're going every 90 to get our next maximum on our petal. So if we add another 90 to that, then that's going to put us at what? It's going to put us at 270. So at 270, we're going to have our next maximum. So this is where all of our petals are going to end up being. So again, to figure out the width, we should actually plot a few more points, but for now, let's just sketch everything around what we have. And so this is roughly what our rose is going to look like once we fill it out.